Fantastic. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to share my screen. And before I do that, I just want to say, please, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. I will try to keep up. I will answer everyone's question, even if I can't get to it during the session or at the end of the session. I will come back and I will answer the questions in the YouTube comments. So go ahead and let me know where you're from, what kind of photography you shoot, and any question that you have as I'm talking, just fire away. So let me share my screen. And here we go. Brand DNA, achieving consistency in wedding photography. So who is this for? I would say that this is for aspiring wedding photographers who feel that maybe they're struggling to define, nail down, or communicate their style, or any genre of photography. If you feel like you're just floating about in the breeze and you keep grabbing onto this trend and that trend and you can't quite figure out what it is you want to do or what it is you want to be known for, hopefully this is going to be useful for you. And I always think that whenever I take part in any kind of education, I try to take away one solid, useful piece of information. So if I manage to set something off in your brain or make you think or give you something, just one thing, I'm going to be happy today. I'll feel like everything has been worth it. I'm here for a reason, and I'm here to share what it is that I do in the hope that it will help you do what you do. So about me, if we haven't met yet, it's lovely to meet you. I am from Great Britain. I'm from a small town in South Wales, and I've been living in Italy for what feels like hundreds of years, since 1996. And I can't believe that this year is my 31st year as a self-employed person. I've been hustling a very, very long time. And I've had a variety of businesses that I've grown and developed, and photography became one of those in about 2010. And I was getting on a little bit at that point. So if you have joined photography a little bit late in the game, I'm here to say, go for it. Everything can be learned, and that's what we're here for. I started shooting weddings very quickly after starting to learn photography, and I was lucky enough to have my second wedding shot solo published in a couple of magazines, and that really got me kickstarted. Ever since then, I've been doing a mixture of portrait, wedding, a little bit of commercial, and I also teach a lot. My favorite thing to do is hang out with photographers, share what I know, and I really love helping to take photographers up to the next level. And I do a lot of retouching as well. That's a big part of what I do. And you can find me at sarahedmunds.co, sarahedmunds.live. That's my retouching platform, and my other commercial sites, my wedding sites, and my training sites are there as well. If you're on Instagram, hit me up, give me a follow at Sarah Edmunds Photographer. I would love to hear from you. I'm very proud to be an ambassador for Godox, and they are graciously hosting this event tonight. So thank you to them. I've been a passionate user of their products for many, many years, and I started using them in about 2017. And a few years later, after about 3 or 4 years of using them exclusively, they asked me to become their ambassador and their educator. So I'm very delighted to be here on their behalf, talking about their products. But I'm also going to be talking about a lot of other things as well, not just lighting. I'm also an ambassador for Canson Infinity and Imagine AI. Now, if you haven't heard of AI editing, well, the future is here, and we're going to be looking at that later on today. I'm also a passionate print photography judge. Print competition has been a big part of my official growth as a photographer. Let's say official, I'd say it's my formal education, because I haven't been formally trained in photography, as in I don't have a degree or an official diploma. I took lots of workshops, I listened to lots of YouTube videos like this one, and then print competition really helped me learn a lot, especially when it comes to the technical side of photography. I am a competition judge for many different organizations and magazines, and I think last year I traveled to 4 different countries being a print competition judge. So thank you again to Godox, and this is just a little look at some of the portrait work that I do, and there's a mix here of commercial stuff, some teaching stuff. There are some literally some lighting test shots that I did at some of my workshops where I was teaching. There's some images that I created for Godox for their lighting tutorials, and there's also some client work as well. So this gives you an overview of the kind of thing that I do on that side. And I try to bring that look and that feel to my weddings. And here's an example of weddings dating from way back when up to some more recent stuff. And I'll be talking about the evolution of my style a little bit later as well. Now, if you're not a member of my Facebook group, please join us. We'd love to have you. There's a QR code there. There's free downloads and ongoing support, because people always ask me how much. I'm a retoucher. So I actually learned retouching before I started to learn photography. So it's a big part of what I do. So I always want to be transparent and say, yes, sometimes I do a lot of retouching, like in this case. And sometimes I don't do any at all. When it comes to weddings, less is more. I'm going to be talking in great detail about that. But I have to show you what just a little before and after. This tutorial is on my platform, which I'm going to give you the link to in a second. And here's another one, a before and after. It's a little bit dramatic. This is not what I do for weddings, but this is a big part of what I do. And you can find the tutorials for those at sarahedmunds.live. So camera equipment. Everybody always wants to know what equipment I'm using, so let's get that out of the way. I use two Sony A7R3s, and I have these 4 lenses, although for weddings, I have one camera with a 70-200 on one hip. I have a Spider holster duo belt, and I have one on one hip with my 70-200. That 70-200 stays on there. I use that all day long. Absolutely love it. And then on the other, I've usually got my 35 or my 50. 85 tends to stay in the studio. My Godox lighting equipment, I've got lots and lots of Godox lighting equipment, obviously being an ambassador, and I've been using, I still have my AD200s from 2017, and they have been with me all over the world. They've been with me to weddings, they've been in the studio, they've been in my handbag, they've been through thunderstorms, and I still have the originals. Ever since then, I've added others as well, but my core wedding lighting kit is the AD300 Pro, AD200 Pros, and AD100 Pro, and I'm a recent convert to on-camera flash. Now, for many years, I was allergic to the word on-camera flash, and I refused to use it. I hated it. On-camera flash has very much come back into fashion, but that's not really how I use it, although I might give it a go. We'll see. Well, I've been talking about not getting swayed by trends. So let's see if I can stay firm on my convictions. What I like to use the on-camera flash for is to provide a little bit of fill in association with the off-camera flash. And the on-camera flash also acts as a trigger that fires the other flashes as well. But I should mention that I have the on-camera flash usually on the shorter focal length, so the 35mm or the 50. And then I have the trigger on the longer lens, because really my on-camera flash sometimes it's not going to reach where I want it to go, even with the zoom. So modifiers, what modifiers do I use? Well, I have both of these, but I tend to take with me the smaller 65cm, the AD-S65S. It's like an umbrella. It just folds up really, really fast, and it goes on my AD300. So I use that for my group shots that I'm going to show you examples of in a second. And then on my AD200s and the AD100, there's the round head attachment, and you just have these magnetic clip-on modifiers. So there you've got a grid, you've got a dome, you've got gels, you've got bounce cards, you've got all kinds of things. Now, brand DNA. What is brand DNA, and why does it matter? Why should we care? Well, this is something that I've been focusing on as a photographer for some years now, trying to define a style. It's very, very difficult. If we look at what a brand DNA is, if we look at this Venn diagram that I fashioned earlier, we have on the left, the pink, we have the purpose, which is the reason your brand exists. It's the core value that you deliver. On the right, we have the message, which is a clear way to say what you do and why you do it. A single message that clearly describes how you solve your client's problem. Then in the middle, we've got the visual identity, and that's what we usually think of when we think of branding. We think of the logo, we think of the visual style, we think of colors, we think of fonts, right? Now, the client experience is a very important part that crosses over, I think, purpose and message. But look what is right in the middle and crosses the purpose, the visual identity, and the message. That's the product, it's our photography. It's the images that we create. The images that we create provides not only our visual identity, but it also communicates our purpose, the reason our brand exists, the core value that we deliver, and it also provides a clear way to say what we do and why we do it. So with our images, we are able to brand ourselves. Now, let's take a few case histories and look at, just open your mind for a second, okay? Because you might find some resistance in this idea, and I get it, I really do. This is a showroom in Milan of a high-end, very well-known brand. Okay. Now, if I go and Google that brand, these are the products that brand comes up. So we have a very consistent message between what is being displayed and what is being sold. Here's another very well-known brand, very distinctive, very similar, very consistent. Here's another very well-known brand, completely different style, but these advertisements show 3 different decades or maybe more of advertising. And these are the products that come up on Google shopping search when I search. So very, very closely related. It's very reliable. We know exactly what we're getting when we search for this brand and when we buy into this brand. So brand DNA, therefore, could be described as being a strong and individual identity. Who doesn't want one of those, right? Photography is a visual medium, so we can strengthen and even create our brand through our work, just as luxury fashion houses create their brand through their clothing design and colors. So the product actually defines the brand, just like with photography. Our photography portfolio and printed products are our brand codes. So do you know your brand DNA? That's the question. Now, I went to have a look at a blog called retaildesignblog.net, and they are showing examples of the ultimate in retail excellence, in retail showcasing, in how to sell to clients, right? So let's see if we can see anything that is common in all of this. Picture after picture is showcasing a very narrow range of styles and colors. It's very, very targeted. It's laser targeted. And ironically, the narrower the range that is displayed, the narrower the offering, the higher the perceived value. The holy grail of a strong brand, the 3 C's: clarity, consistency, which is what we're talking about today, which leads to constancy. Achieving a consistent brand identity through logo, website, and other marketing materials. Now, that's the easy part, because that's what we think of when we think of branding. We think, okay, I need to hire somebody to make me a website and a logo. It's much harder to bring the confidence, to bring that clarity and consistency into our work. As creatives, we tend to be lured by the next bright, shiny trend in wedding or portrait photography. Now, comment if you feel attacked right now. I don't mean attacked. We've all been there. We all want the next bright, shiny thing. It's like, this is the answer. This style is going to be me. And we're trying those things on for size. But we tend to, in doing so, forget to follow what is our style and create our own. So clarity. What do we do to achieve that clarity? Step 1 is to create your portfolio. Remember, your portfolio is part of your brand. As we said before, it's a massive part of your brand. So if you reduce your website showcase to the specific style you want to shoot more of in the future, and the one that you have identified as your DNA. Consistency. Consistency of style is a huge part of us attaining those 3 C's, okay? Hear me out. Consistency of style leads to clarity of branding. Clarity of branding attracts our ideal client who wants what we have to offer. That means that we can meet their expectations, and that leads to constancy or security and then we're producing more of what we want to offer. So we have more consistency of style, and then we have this virtuous circle. Now, if you think about it, wedding photography is probably the most unpredictable part of the entire wedding budget. I mean, if you think about it, they know what the flowers are going to look like. They've got a very good idea of what the flowers are going to look like. They have a very good idea of what the venue is going to look like. They know what the dress is going to look like. So all of these big expenses, they have certainty about. They have no idea what their wedding pictures are going to come out like. So the more consistent your portfolio, the more secure they're going to feel about their choice in hiring you as their trusted professional. So 3 ways to increase consistency. I did promise 3 ways, but there are 3 ways within the 3 ways, okay? So you might want to take notes or screenshot or whatever. But 1 is consistency in shooting. Number 2 is consistency in editing. And something to remember is that consistency in shooting helps you to achieve consistency in editing. And then you have consistency in production, which is albums. It's how you deliver the images to your clients. So albums, design, galleries, and how you present them. So consistency in shooting. Within this, we've got white balance and exposure, key shots, and you need to master lighting. You need to take control of it so that even in natural lighting, you have total command of it, and then you can use artificial lighting when you need it. Just this photograph, for example, is shot with a 400-watt second light with a neutral density filter so that I could have a shallow depth of field and fight against really bright sunlight. Effectively, I turned the outdoors into my studio, and I had the beautiful Lake Garda, which is where I live, as my backdrop. Consistency in shooting, white balance and exposure. Now, getting as close as possible in camera means an easier editing workflow later. I think we're all in agreement there, but the question is, how do you get it as close as possible in camera? My settings is set up to ensure fast, consistent switching between manual and then an aperture priority auto ISO combo. I know, shock, horror. I admit it. I use aperture priority and auto ISO, and I love it. I think I was watching a YouTube video, possibly around 2012, I believe it was, and I was watching the fabulous Cliff Mortner do a wonderful video about shooting weddings, and he said something about shooting in aperture priority and said something like, well, you know, I have this amazing camera. Why not use it? And I thought, I feel like I have permission now to move out of manual. And the result is I feel like I can provide a better service for my client. So I'm by no means saying that you should do this. Absolutely not. I'm just saying that this is what I do. I'm going to explain in more detail what my settings are and why and when I use them in a second. Here we go. So when I'm using ambient light, meaning no flash whatsoever, so just the lights that are on in the room and the sun from the sky, I'm shooting aperture priority. I'm usually at around f2 because shooting at a consistent f-stop helps me have, guess what, consistency, right? That consistent style. I don't want to be going from f8 to f1.4. That's going to result in a completely different look. So I tend to stick around the f2. I might go to f4 in the evenings if there's lots and lots of action, but that combination with auto ISO and an electronic shutter, because I like to move like a ninja during my weddings, I like to be as unobtrusive as possible. Then I have another setting, which is enhanced, what I call enhanced, which is flash blended with ambient light. That is manual, and that's anywhere between f2 to f4. And I will start at an 80th of a second and ISO 800. I might need to up the ISO, and I will certainly slow down the shutter speed in order to allow more ambient light to come through as the evening wears on. And then I have pure strobe, which is no ambient light, and that's usually my studio settings. So my trusted and much loved Sony A7R III, you can see that the dial on the top, there's a 1, a 2, and a 3. Now you can save your favorite settings on each of these numbers. So I've got my ambient light settings saved on number 1. I've got my blended light settings saved on number 2, and I've got my studio light settings saved on number 3. So that means I can quickly move from one to the other. When I'm shooting on aperture priority, I will need to adjust the exposure compensation every now and again. For example, if I'm shooting into strong backlight, that's going to automatically it's going to trick the camera, and the camera's going to underexpose because it's going to see lots of light. Let's say there's somebody standing in front of a window. All of that light coming through the window is telling the camera there's too much light, and so it's going to darken down. And so I will just use my thumb and I will just turn that dial, which is down there at the bottom right, and I will under or overexpose as needed. So I'm still really keeping control of the camera. I'm not letting the camera make all of the decisions, but it's so useful to be able to just go from inside a dark church to run outside into bright, bright sunlight and not have to stop and change settings manually. I just turn them around, or I just adjust the dial, and everything works just fine. So consistency in shooting, white balance and exposure. So why not all manual? Well, as I said before, the camera is a tool. You need to use it in the way that helps you get the job done best. So if that for you is shooting manual all the time, then fantastic. For me, I love to use all of the tools that the camera has at my disposal. And I should also mention that the Sony A7R3 allows me to set the auto ISO. It allows me to set the minimum shutter speed, and I set it to fast, which means that double the focal length is the minimum shutter speed that the camera will allow it. So let me explain. If I'm shooting a 50mm lens, then the slowest the shutter speed will go is 100th of a second before it starts raising the ISO automatically. Okay, and it does all of that without me having to fiddle with the settings. So it means that I can stay consistent. I can keep my aperture exactly as I want it. I don't have to worry about accidentally having motion blur because of the shutter being too slow. So white balance tools. There are several tools that you can use to help you get perfect color balance. But the problem with a wedding is that things are changing so fast that nailing the white balance for every single shot is going to be very, very difficult. So you have a gray card that you can use. You can use a light color meter. You can use the manual Kelvin settings in the camera. So for example, cloudy settings, shade, flash, daylight, tungsten. You can also use a white balance lens cap. It's something that goes on the front of the lens. You can take a white balance reading and then set the white balance there. However, there are pros and cons to all of these. The gray card, for example, and the white balance lens cap, they're both inexpensive and portable, but they're also easy to lose, and you have to remember to take the shot. So how do you use a gray card? Let me just back up there for a second. A gray card, you just hold, it could be something, I have one on a lanyard, for example, that I can keep around my neck, and just for every time the light changes, you take a shot with the gray card in the shot, and then later in Lightroom or your raw editor, you use that little gray card with the eyedropper tool to set the perfect white balance, and then you sync throughout the rest of the set with the same lighting settings. However, the reality is that the temperature of the light is changing constantly. If you're outside and the cloud just moves slightly, the temperature is changing. If a tree branch with leaves blows and sort of moves slightly, you're going to have more of a green cast than you did before. So you're still going to have some adjustments to be made. Color meters are incredibly accurate, but they're also expensive and very losable. I've tried all of these, and I've lost most of the things that can be lost, and I've ended up relying on good old auto white balance in camera. My camera does a great job, and some adjustments in post-production are needed, but then that's the case really with everything. And it means that I don't have to try and remember to constantly be taking these readings. As I said, I don't want to be taking light meter readings when I could be photographing a reaction of a loved one at the wedding. So the new technology of the latest auto white balance combined with AI editing tools, which I'm going to talk much more about in more detail later on, is the easiest, most accurate, and the most cost-effective results on balance, I believe. So let me just admire that picture for a while. Lovely bride, beautiful, beautiful day and beautiful blooms behind her. Consistency in shooting key shots. Now, you can become known and requested for signature shots. Make these your classic standards that you're fairly certain you can recreate at each wedding, regardless of location. Now, my key shots are going to be very different from yours. I shoot 90% documentary style. I do take pictures and portraits. I'm known for my portraits, so obviously my brides want me to take portraits, but I'm also very, very non-intrusive. I want my couples to feel very relaxed on the day. Generally in Europe, the most requested style is documentary and non-invasive photography. Some don't even want group shots, and I have to persuade them to take group shots because I know that there's going to be members of the family who are mad if they don't get group shots. So my key shots tend to be fun, unposed moments during preparations, the spontaneous reaction of the parents of the bride, the look on the groom's face as he sees the bride walking down the aisle, reactions, close-up shots of rings as they're placed on fingers. I tend to go in very close when I do those. These are in addition to standard shots like family group portraits, exits from the church, cake cutting, and all of those obvious points throughout the day. Now, overall, my number one message is authenticity. So that's what is driving me throughout the whole day, is that I don't want to be very strong in one area, just portraits, and weak in others. I want to capture the moment, the feelings, the emotions, and the genuine atmosphere of the day. So my number one message that I want to get across is authenticity. Of course, beauty is part of that because everybody's at their most beautiful on a wedding day. Everything has been curated and styled. So we're very lucky to that respect in that all of that's done for us. So I take it for granted that we want beautiful pictures too. But underneath that, I want authenticity. I want the portraits to be authentic. I want the look in the bride's face as she looks in the camera to feel authentic. There's a shot of a mother of the bride coming through to see her daughter, and there's her daughter getting ready. Now, I don't pose these moments, so she was actually spraying perfume at that moment. I'm moving around, I'm doing the moving around, and I'm not asking my couples to do the moving around usually. Lovely moment as the bride hugs her uncle. So key shots that you might be known for, I'm just going to throw out some ideas for you because you need to think about what you want to be known for. What is going to be your brand DNA? So it could be wide angle hero shots, could be dramatic portraits, it could be some crazy dance floor action, tender moments, it could be super produced, stylized pre-wedding portraits, it could be colored gel photography, there's all kinds of things that you could make your thing and make your voice. So decide what your signature is and make sure that you display those shots on your website and your sample products. Oh, I remember this moment. This was such a touching moment. This was a real moment. This was not orchestrated. This also was not orchestrated. Dad coming in to see his daughter, the look on his face. That's the same girl that was in the redhead that was in the picture before. Oh, there she is again. And the same lovely couple. And I love to just let my couples I like to use a long lens and I tell them to just relax and enjoy their moment by themselves and just breathe each other in and just enjoy the moment of peace before they go back into the crowd and the chaos that is the wedding day. And I like to capture these moments, and they seem to like it too. Groom and his dad getting ready. Some fun moments during the party. Oh, look at the look in her eyes. It's a real privilege to photograph someone's wedding. I very rarely fail to get moved when I'm photographing these emotions. So some of these are from way back from when I started 13 years ago, and some are more recent. bride listening to her dad give the speech. I remember the speeches as well. It's amazing. I also love to get this shot. So this is when I will get, if I'm shooting alone, which I've done a lot of, I will be in the aisle. I will get the reaction of the groom as he sees the anticipation really, rather than seeing the bride. And then I will quickly walk behind him and shoot over his shoulder and capture the look on the bride's face with her dad as she sees him. Usually that eye contact moment is one to catch. There's always so many fun, great moments during a wedding. So consistency in shooting, mastering light. Now, eliminating the risk of relying on natural light when the natural light is awful, because let's face it, sometimes it really is. So going back to what I take to weddings, this is what I take with me: an AD300 Pro, some AD200s, a V863, which is an on-camera flash, or the V1 Pro. The new V1 Pro is amazing from Godox. And then I have an X Pro trigger, and all of those fit into a little carry-on size case. And the V1 Pro, this is an on-camera flash, but I recently used it in the studio and I shot all day, 7 fashion sets for about 6 hours on one battery. So I think you have 100 full power shots on a single battery, but obviously if you lower the intensity of the flash, which I'm rarely shooting on full power, it can really last a long time. So that's my new favorite. Now here's an example of how I will shoot natural light and then how I can use an artificial light, or the AD300 Pro in this case, with a softbox to mimic that natural light. So on the left, I have natural light. This is my favorite archway at a particular venue, and it's my favorite archway because usually the light is coming in at such an angle that it's really, really beautiful and flattering. Plus, there's this natural sort of framing of the subject, and sometimes there'll be a little bit of leaves, a little bit of greenery, depending on the time of year. But sometimes, depending on the time of day, the light won't quite be falling as it should. So on the wedding on the right, I'm mimicking what usually happens by using an AD300 Pro in a softbox feathered across the couple and blended with the ambient light. And this gives a really natural but more controlled look. So if I hadn't used that light, they would have been in much more shadow, and I would have had to have used post-production to kind of brighten them up, and it would not give the same effect. It would not look as good. And then the middle picture is just the same little archway, but this time I'm shooting a fashion model and I've got another light behind her to highlight the smoke effect. I had some smoke in a can. This is my favorite lighting for groups, and this is covered shade. So this isn't always available, but wherever there is a large covering, such as a balcony or a terrace above a doorway, that can provide some beautiful lighting because the light is coming in at the right angle, and usually it's bouncing off the floor as well. And it bounces up and it just creates this beautifully flattering glow. And then if there's a doorway or something, that provides a frame as well. So this is one of my favorite setups. This is the same wedding, but at the venue when we got to the lake, that was at the hotel, when we got to the lake, they desperately wanted the lake to be in the shot. They'd flown everybody all the way to Lake Garda to have their wedding. They wanted the lake in it. So the only way I could get them, because they were in complete shadow, the lake is being lit by the setting sun, but where they were standing was in total shadow. So they just would have been silhouetted. So I just quickly pull out my AD300 Pro, switch my settings. Remember I told you the from number 1 to number 2 to blended, start with my starting point, pop up my umbrella, and in a couple of minutes, I'm ready to go. And I've brought my studio light to Lake Garda. This is the same location, but this time they'd erected actually a white dance floor, which provided a fantastic reflector. And with my little 65 centimeter softbox, just by feathering it across the group, blending with the ambient light, I was able to keep all of those rich tones in the sky. And this is unedited, so this is straight from Lightroom. So you can see that the light is falling off a little bit to the gentleman as it goes across, and it's slightly brighter on the ladies. But had I not had that AD300 Pro with me, or an AD200 would have done a great job as well. This shot would not have happened. The sky would have been pure white. Let's put it that way. This is the same group, literally seconds later. So I managed to get one or a couple, I think a handful, maybe two official group shots, and then all hell broke loose. So lots of fun to be had there. This is an example, another example of how I use the AD300 Pro to provide a really natural group lighting. This is just a tiny little pop of light that is cleaning up the skin tone. So there's so much greenery around, right? That by using light, I can make sure that no matter what the lighting condition is like, or what, no matter what the time of day, no matter what the time of year, it's always going to look the same. So this is my favorite hedge to pose people. I bring out my light, it's camera left, it's feathered across them. And we're having a little bit of fun, as I love to do with group shots. This group of lovely ladies, same location. Here we've got a little bit more backlight, but that's fine. And I'm controlling that light on their faces and I'm making them look fabulous. So I absolutely know that I'm not at the mercy of the elements or what the light happens to be doing. And I'm also cleaning away all of that green color cast by using the professional lighting. Same place, keep an eye out for the photo bombers. There's usually one or two at every wedding, and they always make for a fun shot. So this is a situation, this is the same, this is the loggia where the lake is, and it's in extreme darkness compared to the lake. So I have to use my light. They always want to have their picture taken with the lake behind them and the pillars of the loggia. And so by using my AD300 Pro, I can just pull it out and I can get a nice group shot. And once again, I'm feathering across the group, which means that instead of pointing it to just one little small group, I'm actually just angling it across the group and sort of having the edge of the light kiss the entire group. So it's really a question of angling and positioning, really. So I've got that quite camera left, a couple of meters, I would say. If I don't have a light, I will turn the group with their backs to the sun and have them face me. You can see that the skin tones aren't quite as clean, and that's just the sacrifice that you make for being a little bit freer in just shooting ambient light. We're back to my favorite covered shade position, and this is just, you can see that there's no shadows, they're glowing. Look at the mother of the bride. She looks, both the mother of the bride and the groom, they're looking absolutely fantastic. All of these ladies looking absolutely wonderful. No retouching, straight out of camera. And remember this shot? So this is what covered shade looks like. Remember, you've got, what we're doing is the terrace above is blocking the light from coming straight down. This is why I don't want them standing out. Even if there is a cloudy sky, and people always love to say, but a cloudy sky is like a big softbox. Yeah, but it's kind of in the wrong place. I don't want the softbox right above, because what's going to happen is that you're going to get panda eyes and it's not going to be as flattering as it could be. So there's something that I like to call the sweet spot. And you can find this, it's going to change. It's never going to be the same exact spot every time, because it depends on the time of day, the time of year, and a variety of other factors like the clouds and all kinds of things. So you could ask somebody, an assistant, to stand, let's say they're standing in front of that door. You ask them to stand there and then walk slowly towards you, take a step and look carefully at their eyes. And then as they're walking to you, they'll come a second, they will take a step and you'll see it. You'll see their eyes light up. You will see that their skin starts to glow, and that's the sweet spot. That's where you're going to put your groups. So you can see as well that the light's bouncing up. So everything's coming in at the right angle. It's kind of like a natural clamshell. Now, if I don't have that covered light, then I'm just going to turn. I tend to shoot in a lot of bright sunlight because I'm in Italy. So what I will do is just turn them around, or I will move around so that the sun is behind them and I'm shooting in, and I'm just going to expose for their skin tones. I'm just shooting so that they look great and I'm not concerned with what's behind them. You can have, if there's a hedge that's blocking the light, then great. But if not, then you can just let that light hit the back of them. Here's an example of a couple. They didn't want a really formal pictures taken at the venue. They just wanted to enjoy themselves. So while they were drinking their Prosecco, I moved around and made sure that that golden light was behind them, and I just grabbed a quick couple of shots. This is a shot that I just pulled from a gallery just to demonstrate the same principle. The bridesmaids are just waiting to go up to the ceremony. And while they're waiting, I just took a quick shot of them, and actually, no, my second shooter took a quick shot of them. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that the light's behind them. So would not want to be the other way around and shooting into them. This is much nicer, in my opinion. So at all times, while I'm moving around the couples as they're going about their day, I am focusing on where I want to be so that I'm in the right position to get the light. Let me just check the group question. Let me just answer. Okay, because I've seen a question from Michelle. I'm going to answer it because I'll forget later. So, which lens was I using for that large group shot in front of the water? Probably my 50. Probably my 50. Don't like to be too wide with groups. Probably my 50. And if I can, I'll use my 70 to 200. I'll just back up and I'll use as long as lens as possible. But yeah, I think for that picture, it's my 50. Right. Moving on. Oh, it's this beautiful couple again. So what happens if the couple, so when we go for our portraits with the couple, I will just tell them, right, we're just going to go for a wander around the grounds. You guys can just relax, enjoy yourselves, just enjoy being together. And I might place you in the right light, but otherwise just walk around and take a break, which they love because it's been a crazy day up until this moment. Now, at this point, I know that there's no point in me walking in front of them and taking their picture because they've got the sun shining right in their face. So I'm behind them and I wanted to get a nice picture of them with the highlight, with the sun sort of providing a rim light, but I'm shooting them from behind because I know that otherwise it's just a wasted shot. Then when they're in cover, I would then go around and in fact, in their album, there's this shot and then there's the shot from the front once they're in that cover and they don't have the sunlight in their faces. This is more of the same. This is same location, different place on the island and different couple, different year, but a similar look. You can see that I'm starting to get things consistent. Once again, similar principle. On the left, things are a little bit softer. The sun has gone down, so therefore it's less harsh. On the right, we've got much harsher light, but I really like the shadows that were being created on the ground. So I just asked them to stop and just have a quick kiss. And I've got a nice long lens. So they feel much more intimate and able to be themselves with each other and enjoy their moment together rather than feel like they're being posed. If I'm back and just shooting them from a long lens and I just ask them to just nuzzle, just enjoy being together, kiss, cuddle, just take this moment for yourselves, and then I get the shot. Here's that lodger again. This is really tricky because everybody always wants the lake in the background and they want the arches, but without the light, in this case, the AD300 Pro, it's going to look like on the left, whereas I want it to look like on the right. And this is, I've retouched out that line at the top, but other than that, I haven't retouched anything else. Blended off and on camera flash for reception. Now, this is when lighting at weddings really comes into its own and where you can really raise your game, I believe. Because this is the kind of lighting we're dealing with. If you don't have lighting with you, this is what you're going to have to deal with. And if you don't have lighting with you, this is what happens if you're shooting just ambient light. This is absolutely unusable. It's unprintable. So you can just see me there. You can see me behind in the top right-hand corner there. I'm there. I've got the trigger on. So I'll show you what these pictures look like later on with the light, how it should be. This is my favorite lighting setup. I've used you could use 4 lights. I use 3, but if you have 4 lights, then you can have 4 corners of the room. Otherwise, just have 3 lights pointing in to the center of the room, and that should cover the whole area as high up as possible and pointing down to avoid any kind of shadows being cast. Now, the results are that on the left, you can see this is color corrected. So I've tried to get the skin tone, and I have got the skin tones good in post-production, but without artificial light, without the off-camera flash, everything looks a little bit cold and a little bit office-like. Whereas on the right, that's with my 3-point lighting setup. So I'm able to expose for the room more how it was in real life. So there's this lighting that is going along that paneling all around the room, and it's providing this warm glow. it's not actually as cold as it seems in the color corrected version. So this is when, and I didn't have to do anything with these. I edited them with Imagine, a talent profile with Imagine, which is called Love and Light. And they just came out beautifully. And they just look so much more three-dimensional. They're also, the ISO is lower, so the file is cleaner. But remember when I said about being ready for any occasion and having those preset settings on the dial, I figured while I was shooting this that the bridesmaids and the best man were going to do their speeches on the other side of the room, whereas they should have been where the bride and the groom were. They were on the other side where there was no lighting. So I just quickly turned my setting around to number 1, turned around, shot ambient light settings for them. But you can see what it looks like. I mean, I got the shots, it's fine. But you can see that everything looks cold, even though I've edited their skin tones. Their skin tones are good. But compare that with the other side of the room where the 3-point light setting is working. And we were able to capture this great shot of this lady looking adoringly at her husband. And this is the 3-point lighting setup that I use for all my receptions, and it enables me, I know that I don't have to worry about what the reception lighting is going to look like, and I know that I can capture everything on the dance floor. Everything's going to look even, and I'm not going to have that direct flash look, which the direct flash look is great if that's what you want, but if you want something that's a little bit more three-dimensional, then the 3 or 4-point lighting setup, or 2, you could do it with 2 lights as well, just have 2 lights on either side of the room, that would work as well. But I've just used it again and again in this situation. So what I did was, you can see the light behind the couple with the cake. So from the dance floor, I took 1 light, put it behind the couple, put the other 2 on either side of the cake pointing in at them. And guess what happened? I'm glad I did have those lights, because the father of the bride decided to shake up the champagne and spray it at the couple and absolutely drench them. So I was able to capture that shot. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to make it. And then something told me to just look back at him, and yeah, there he goes. Father of the bride is swigging the last bit of champagne. So this is actually me shooting at a reception. And here you can really see that with the iPhone, everything looks kind of flat and yellow, but it didn't really look like that, honestly. You can see how high as well I'm trying to get the lights. It's almost touching the ceiling, the canopy, and pointing down as much as possible so that we're not having those shadows cast. And this was late. This was past midnight. I'm just excusing my appearance, the state of me. And I'm using the V863 with the bounce card pointed up, probably -1 compensation, something like that. That is triggering the 3 other lights, and the end result is this. So I'm able to get, guess what? Consistency, okay? Remember that this was what we were dealing with before. And this is what it looked like with the 3-point lighting setup. Ambient light at one event at another wedding, and this is the same, literally meters away, but where the lights were pointing at the dancing area. Everything, the skin tones look great, everybody looks wonderful. It was a dream to edit. There are my lights, the 3-point lighting setup. There they are. And a question has come in saying, if I have a lot of strobes, am I ever concerned about guests being potentially bothered? Yes, I have been. I recently shot an event where I could not eat, because of the nature of the event, I couldn't have strobes, so I used on-camera flash for the whole thing. It was much harder. I was still able to do it, but it was much harder. Here you can see I've got the light stands tucked away in areas where people aren't going to trip over them. That's a really good point. So yeah, you do what you can. And if you can, then great. But if not, then you've got to go with what you have, work with what you have. But this is a great setup because this allows me to really get the best results, let's put it that way. And here you can see that my on-camera flash, fill flash is lighting the bride, but then that 3-point setting is taking care of the bridesmaids as well. And above all, it's those skin tones. But it just allows me to capture these moments. the bride and groom getting down on the dance floor, reactions. So imagine if I'd had on the gentleman at the bottom, imagine if I'd had on-camera flash, that flash would have been coming at the side of his face, which would have looked completely different than the light at the moment. He is looking towards where the light is. So it just looks so much more organic. I don't know if that's the right word. And yeah, time and again, same setup works for me. The groom and his sister enjoying an impromptu dance, and the bride enjoying the first dance with her new stepson. So many wonderful memories. I remember every single one of these moments like it was yesterday. This was a long time ago. So consistency in editing. Now, I bet you thought that when I was going to be talking about consistent wedding photography, I'd be talking all about presets, right? Well, most of it's in the capture. But consistency in editing is important as well. And my recommendation is that if you want your photography to be timeless and classic, avoid trends that will date quickly and make your portfolio look inconsistent as you shift styles to follow the latest one. Comment if this has ever happened to you, or if you've ever done this, or you feel like you've been trying to follow trends and you end up all over the place. So the reason I recommend this is that because remember the brands that we looked at the beginning of this presentation. Clients need to feel secure that they know what they're getting when they book you and that you can deliver what they expect. And remember as well that unpredictability of the wedding photography element. They might be thinking, well, you've made that couple look great, but that couple's better looking and their wedding is more expensive. And are you going to be able to make us look that good? There's always that insecurity, and it's a very personal thing having your picture taken, and not everybody enjoys it. So consistency in editing. Imagine this is where I get to give you a present. So go ahead and scan that QR code, and I'll be giving out a link as well to the guys at Adorama who can share it. Now, a consistent white balance edit with emphasis on skin tones is what I've been all about, and what I used to try to do whenever I edited. And I've edited a lot of weddings because I also edit for other people, not just my own weddings. What I try to do is to get the skin tones consistent from the beginning of the wedding, the beginning of the day to the end of the day. So I will be spot checking my skin tones at the getting ready stage, in the church, outside, in the groups, with light, without light, end of the night, and I will try to make sure that the white balance is consistent, or the skin tones are consistent. It's not going to be the white balance that's consistent. It's the white balance, the edit of the white balance that's consistent, that gives the consistent skin tones. Less is more. A classic, timeless edit will allow for consistency over time. Now, with a few exceptions, I'm able to take images that I took 8, 9, 10 years ago, and they're still representative of what I do today. Make your own preset for basic adjustments, or use a neutral AI editing profile. I would avoid using very, very fancy presets. When I say fancy, I mean very complicated ones with lots of adjustments and really strong color changes for various reasons. One, there's a very good likelihood that it's not going to look good on your picture. So if you've ever bought a preset and then you've tried to put it on your picture and you've just thought, well, why is that not working? It's even making my own presets. It's very, very difficult to make something that is going to look good on everybody's pictures, on different styling, different lighting, different skin tones. It's not always going to work. So I find the more basic the adjustment, the simpler the adjustment, the more universal that preset is going to be. Also with very, very strong presets, so pushing colors and strong curves, that will affect printing, usually not in a good way. So less is more. I use Imagine, Love and Light because I made it. So you can have a free trial with 1,500 free edits with no obligation. And trust me, you're going to love it. I made it from 10 years of hand editing weddings. And I do remember one very, very painful year when I spent most of Christmas editing and sweating. If you can imagine a cartoon female, blonde, sweating over a desk, slowly withering away with a mountain of, I think it was something like 70,000 pictures I had to edit that year. It wasn't pretty, but I got through it and I did it. And best of all, I made the profile Love and Light, which now so many people use. And it's really popular because it's very simple, it's very clean, it's very consistent. Optional, you can add a creative look on top. So if you do like something a little bit more different, like a film preset or a grain or a heavy vignette or whatever it is you want to do, you can put that on top of the edit. But what's great is the time factor. Now, instead of taking weeks to edit a wedding, I will take less than an hour usually. Retouching. I recommend retouching only images that will end up in the album because otherwise you will get bogged down and it's also very, very difficult to stay consistent. So yeah, only images that are selected for printing get retouched. That's my recommendation. So the gallery that I give the client, that's from they're all edited in Lightroom, but there's no retouching. So here's just a quick look. Now, if this is laggy, I apologize, but this is a recording of, I pre-recorded it just to make sure everything went smoothly for this. But this is an example of what Imagine gives me when I send it off. I send the raw files off, or rather the catalog is uploaded by Imagine. Imagine Love and Light does its fabulous thing. It knows how I like to edit. It knows that I like to edit for skin tones, that I don't mind the background being blown out a little bit if necessary. And the skin tones are just, I probably need to edit about 10%. When I say edit, I mean I need to tweak about 10% of what comes back. So you can see that it's doing a really nice job of giving that sort of golden pop. I do have my own profile, Caraway, on top, which is a Lightroom creative profile. That's just giving a slightly creamier contrast on top. But the next one we're going to look at does not have that. Here you can see it's doing a great job of cleaning up that orange cast that's in the evening pictures. Did a beautiful job of that. And once again, the skin tones are matched. That's because I think in my working copy of Love and Light, I've got nearly 60,000 edits now, and it was originally built with around 30,000. Here's another wedding. This one doesn't have that Caraway creative profile on top. And you can see, now it will do a better job. The closer you are in camera, the better the job Imagine will do. So even more reason to try to get it in close in camera. But look, you see, that's what I see when I get the edits back from Imagine. I will see the raws and then all of the edits will pop up. The colors are very true. There's nothing fancy going on. It's very, very, very simple. There's the before and after in bright direct sunlight, then in shade. And I just love those colors. So if you want to watch me edit that actual wedding live from start to finish, the whole thing, I think it's like 1,500 images, more than 1,000 anyway, between 1,000 and 500 images. Go ahead and scan that code. We will give you the links as well, and you can watch on YouTube as I edit the whole thing live, and I tweak it as well at the end. So the evolution of my editing style. Now, I used to do too much. It's impossible to maintain, or it was for me. I now reserve retouching for albums and elaborate retouches only for wall art. Now, my online galleries is a basic Lightroom edit only, delivered quickly. And here you can see an example of a heavily retouched image that I transformed into a wall art for a client. This was a fine art print on an Amalfi frame from Graphic Studio, and it looked beautiful and it was worth it. But in terms of consistency, this is very hard to replicate because it took several hours to make. And it also doesn't sit well in the album because I can't make all of the images in the album look like this. This is another one, and this one is very close to my heart because it won me my first WPPI award. This won first place in the Premier category. This is a bride. She is in the forest. It is a foggy day, but I did do a lot to it. I did quite a lot of manipulation. I added some pieces of hair. I made the whole atmosphere much cooler. I added a little bit of fog at the bottom. And once again, this wasn't something that I could replicate for the whole wedding. This again was wall art so one piece, one standalone piece, but I can't make the whole wedding look like that. And I can't replicate it for another client either. So I've decided to just take it off my website and not show it anymore. This is now my style. It's very clean. It's true colors. it's spontaneous, and it's fresher. And I find that I prefer it over time. I feel like it stands the test of time much more. And I feel like it's much more reflective of what I'm able to offer my clients now. Now, these aren't unretouched. These are Lightroom edits, by the way. So consistency in production. Production is delivery. So online galleries, albums, prints. And these are my online galleries. So I will deliver the online gallery to the client with all of the shots from the wedding, from the shoot, the shoots from the shop, the shots from the shoot. And I will deliver usually between, I say 800, but it usually ends up being a lot more, because if the shot is good and I feel like the clients will appreciate it, then I want to give it to them. So it's usually an average of 1,200 for a full 12-hour day. So things look consistent. So from wedding to wedding, it looks pretty consistent. And then when you go inside the gallery, again, things are looking pretty consistent. So all of the pictures look very, very solid in terms of consistency of style. I don't have drastically changing color balances or exposures. So it lends to that professional finish, that consistency. And here's a better peek into showing a live scroll through a gallery, showing lots and lots of images. There are so many moments here that I don't want to cut out something that potentially might be very important to that client. So especially these people. The accessories is a little bit different. That's in this case, this is an influencer, so I know that she wanted to give a lot of images to her suppliers, but I don't want to take away one of these images. Look at, just the little boy looking at there's just so many. So I just try to make sure that they're all consistent and deliverable. So I want to make everything deliverable from the very beginning to the very end of the wedding. The final product is the album. This is the only thing you have total control over, by the way. Now, you have no idea what monitor your client is looking at the pictures on. So you might be looking at it on your monitor, and what they're seeing is something completely different, whereas the album is the printed product that you can have full control over what it looks like. I try to keep the album spreads, guess what, consistent. And I try to do that using color, contrast, and sometimes in a room, the decor helps you, because in this room, for example, the little boy is looking through the window, looking at his mum getting ready. And then I've got the decor, the color of the walls is tying everything together along with the skin tones. So the greens and the peaches of the skin tones is my color palette for that spread. Here I've got a spread of details, including the little boys picking up the petals on the floor, details of the bouquet, but it's the blues of the outfits matching with the petals and the skin tones, providing those blues and peaches. So we're very lucky as wedding photographers, because a lot of thought has gone into color schemes. So a lot of this is done for us. We just need to make sure that everything on the spread is helping that and not hindering it. In church, remember my key shots, I'm focusing on faces, emotions, feelings, the looks on people's faces. Usually this is just a wonderful moment. Even the most reserved of families, there's usually a lot of emotion going on behind those eyes. And once again, details, I tend to try and put all together and tie everything together in terms of color palette and toning. Now, in terms of key shots, this is something I've started doing recently. Now the picture on the left is actually what's the word? Collage, a panorama. I think this is about 18 pictures. I will take a shot of my hand so that I know where the sequence starts. I will then start shooting. I'll go into manual focus and manual camera settings. I will shoot around. Actually, I think the last one I didn't go into manual camera settings. I just let it do auto and then managed to even them out fine. I take pictures all around, as many as I can, and then in Photoshop, from Lightroom, I will just auto align them in Photoshop, and Photoshop does a great job of doing that automatically. So that's my latest thing. Instead of doing a super wide angle shot, because I don't have a wide angle lens anymore, I decided that was no longer part of my brand DNA. So I've taken that out. And I tend to do this one big picture. And I do that with portraits as well sometimes if I have a big panorama. Always be ready for the unexpected. So I was going through my albums, and this is from a long time ago. This was taken in Switzerland. And the parents of the bride decided to start dancing and showing off their ballroom dancing skills right outside the church. So, off we went, and this became a spread in the album. I love to tell a story on an album, and if I'm going to have a black and white, I want the whole spread to be black and white, again, for consistency and polish. And what I love about this is the cinematic going from the bride and groom, they've got their hands clasped, and then I saw her look at him. And this is during the ceremony, where the ceremony is quite long, it's about an hour long. And there's a lot of the priest is talking quite a lot, and I can't do much moving around, but I'm paying attention. And I saw the bride look over at her groom, and I just thought, I think I know what she's going to do. And she just looked down. So I kind of figured she was going to, so I focused on them. And so the sequence of her taking his hand and then squeezing his hand, I thought just made a beautiful spread. And in fact, this was part of their album. Again, for consistency, I like to have a 3-step process of the same image across a spread. So here they're taking each other's hands, they're looking at each other, they pull each other's close, and then finally they relax into each other and rest their foreheads against each other. By the way, this was at a venue where it didn't really have anywhere great to take pictures. So we climbed a fence and we went into the field, into the field next to the venue, and we took the shots. I remember the groom actually was carrying his bride over his shoulder so that she didn't, because there was very long grass. So, you have to find your location. This is my lovely couple from before. And here, the bouquet with the very strong colors. This was October, and the colors are really tying the palette together. So I made sure that all 3 images had a little bit of the bouquet in it, because I found that the one without the bouquet just didn't quite sit well. Here, the details, I'm using the contrast of the black and white throughout the spread to tie everything together. And again, remember, this is from an old wedding. This is probably about 10 years ago. But they've usually gone to so much thought about the color palette that it's really making our lives easy for us. So we're able to create a beautiful, consistent spread in color. Just have to make sure that editing is consistent. And then whenever there are emotions, strong emotions, I like to go black and white. And so we've got the father of the bride with his genuine reaction. So this was not staged. He walked in and that was his face. I did know he was coming. Somebody said, I think the bride's going to come in soon. So I was ready for it. But then he looks down at her. Look, he's looking down at her dress. He looks up again. He's bursting with pride. And then they both shed a little tear. It's just, oh, this is just lovely. And this is the same couple. Again, we've got the color scheme tying everything together, her beautiful red hair, his warm suit, the warmth of the stone. And then there was this little pool of warm golden hour just hitting a little sliver of that rock. So I just had her stay there in that light. Whenever we're transitioning between one place and another in an album, I like to tell that story. So it helps me connect the one place to the next place. So I don't like to jump from one place to the next. So this is an example of that. And the bridesmaids' dresses are kind of tying in with the scenery and the blues of the lake and the bouquet. It's all working together. Here's another example of when I like to tell a story in a spread. So usually the groom is really nervous just before she comes in, and I like to capture that moment. And then we've got one set of bridesmaids come in, second set of bridesmaid. His face is just like, oh my God, this is it. And then look at the face, look at his face as he turns around and he sees her. So I feel like it's stronger by showing that progression. The signing of the registers, rather than just having a signature, let's look at them getting ready to sign. The registrant is just preparing everything. He signs, she signs, and then they look at each other as the celebrant puts his signature. And that was a legal wedding in Italy. So they know that those signatures is actually the moment that they become man and wife. Same couple. And again, I like to, this is one of my signature shots, by the way, the back of the dress shot. usually over the lake, and then I just tell them to take a moment. I go back, I've got my long lens on, and I yelled at him to kiss her like he really means it, and then they burst out laughing and look at me, and it just makes for a nice progression. This was a difficult album to make because my instruction, very strict instruction, was that there was to be no white space whatsoever on any page. So everything had to fit. So usually I would make the close-up of somebody a little bit smaller in the frame to balance with the others, but I wasn't able to do that in this case. But here I wanted to focus on the mystery of, we can't see, from inside the church, we could see the back of the bride, and she was being covered. Everybody was trying to protect her so she couldn't be seen, and then they've got the veil over her. Everybody's then leaning over, trying to see, like, what is she wearing? What does she look like? What does she look like? And then she comes in, and then I've maintained the mystery by shooting her from behind so that we still can't see on the spread. We still can't see what she looks like. Again, the signing of the register, this is the same bride. Instead of just the two signatures, we've got, she's looking back at her new husband, he signs, he passes the pen to her, and then she signs. Remember the taking control of the lighting? This is my favorite 3-point lighting setup. And when the groom and his sister went into a full-blown dance routine, I was able to make a complete spread of this thanks to my AD200s that were in their usual position. Okay, so as we come to an end, I'm going to just tell a funny story. Now, talking about being prepared for the unexpected, this was quite some time ago. Now, what I'd done was I was set up initially, the central picture is the first picture that was taken. And I thought that the guests were where I was taking the picture from. So I thought that they would be cutting the cake from behind. And I had set up my light to be behind them so that I had a backlight. As I was taking the picture, though, the pyrotechnics went off, and I had not been told about said pyrotechnics. So I had to run to avoid being set on fire and run around the other side, switching my settings as I went because my flash was being hidden by the pyrotechnics. Switched my settings, went to ambient light only. I think you can see that on either side. I've balanced it out by placing the two ambient pictures on either side, and then the main picture where they're actually cutting the cake, which was the first picture in the center. But in doing so, I ran into a cactus, and I still have the scar to this day. So I'm sure I'm not the only wedding photographer to have a story like that. But yeah, always be prepared. And so having those preset settings was an absolute I was so grateful for that moment that I was able to keep shooting. Now, before I end this and I start to take your questions, this is a picture of me behind the scenes. Remember when I said that I was saying I try to position myself and wait for the person to come into the right light? Well, this is the behind the scenes, and then this is the picture that was taken, that was just as I received it back from Imagine with the love and light profile applied to it. So it's just a shot from the wedding, but instead of it just being a snapshot, you know, these lovely bridesmaids look like fairies coming through the forest. And if you want to watch a whole wedding being shot, and especially how I'm using the Godox lights, then you can go and have a look at this video from Godox, which is me shooting a wedding. And you can see how the ambient light was not capturing the sky at all. The real sky is the one you can see on the right, where I've got the AD300 Pro. So these pictures were actually taken a few seconds between each other. So if you have any questions, you can ask me anything. Well, within limits, within certain limits. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you got your one nugget of useful information to take away. I'm going to go and answer a few of these questions before we wrap it up. And what camera do I use? I believe I answered that one, Sony A7R3. For the meantime, I'm very happy with that camera. I don't have any plans to upgrade for the moment. It's been going strong for a long time. I'm so far resisting the temptation to spend more money on upgrading. Do I have a favorite ISO f-stop? I do have a favorite f-stop, which I said before, which is f2 is my f2 or f2.2. seems to be the sweet spot. I love a sharp image, and at around f2, there's this beautiful balance between f1.4 is beautiful, obviously, because it's such a shallow depth of field, but it's not quite as sharp as f2. So my favorite is f2 in the studio as well. A question from Heather. Can I please talk about tricky locations and creating a brand when dealing with them? Yeah, what a great question. So I would say that if you take control of your light and you focus on well, it doesn't have to be authenticity, but I don't think it goes amiss really when it comes to weddings. But if you concentrate on focusing on light and framing, so let's celebrate the beauty of a simple, well exposed, well composed, well framed photograph with no bells and whistles. You don't have to have anything particularly fancy. Now, if the lighting is tricky, that can be hard. The last event it wasn't a wedding, it was an event. It was a corporate event, and it was the most difficult lighting I've experienced so far. And it was difficult because I wasn't able to use my off-camera flash. I wasn't able to use light stands because the event was moving from room to room. I wasn't able to keep taking them with them. There were too many people. There wasn't the appropriate place to make the light stand safe. So I made an executive decision that it was going to be on-camera flash only, bounced flash whenever possible. The difficulty was that half of the room was natural light. The other half was had very little natural light and had lots of this very orange tungsten light. So you know what happens when you have the white balance for the orange tungsten, the rest of the room goes blue. If you have correct white balance for the natural light side of the room, the rest of it is deep orange. So that was tricky, but what really made it difficult was that the ceilings and the walls were green. So if I bounced the light, then I was getting a green cast from the ceiling. Had the ceiling been white, I would have been fine. So I did a lot of on-camera flash and just tried to balance it with the ambient light as much as possible so that the on-camera flash was cleaning up the skin tones. And I was just able to they were delighted. They were absolutely delighted. They had no idea that I struggled. I had to spend a little bit more, let's say 3 hours in Lightroom instead of the usual 1 or less. How many photos should be delivered for a full day and evening of photography? About 8 hours. I think I answered this, but I would say I don't think should is the right question. When I started, I think the first wedding I shot, I think I delivered like 300 images because I had fewer good images to give them. Now, pretty much everything I shoot in the wedding, there are very, very few that I need to throw away. So it's really a question of culling down but I usually cull down to it ends up being about 1,200 for 12 hours. So I'd say possibly 100 an hour is a good ballpark, but whatever you feel comfortable with. And I would definitely, less is more as well. If you're able to curate it, if you're able to cull it down to the very best, I would say that is better. How do you cull or edit the images after a wedding? For me, it usually takes longer than the wedding itself. Yes, it used to. Oh, it used to take me weeks. Now it takes less. The culling, Imagine has a new free beta testing culling studio, which I strongly recommend you give a shot. I used it on the last event that I did, and it worked great. I'm still a little bit of a control freak when it comes to culling at the moment. So what I will do is usually as soon as possible after the wedding. I'm not as good as Susan Stripling, who does it the night of the wedding. What I will do is upload the images from the wedding the night of the wedding. I'm usually too tired. I'll make sure everything is backed up on the night of the wedding. I wish I could cull the night of. I think if I got in early enough, if I got in at like 9 p.m., I would do it. But if I'm arriving home at 1 p.m., 1 a.m., which is usually the case, then I'm going to leave it until the next day. And then I use Imagine to do the editing. So I will cull very quickly. I will maybe cull it down to about 1800 and then I'll send it off to Imagine. But Imagine has a new thing whereby it will show you a preview of the edits before you cull, which is super, super useful. So give that a try, but that's brand new. It's going down. Do I have an assistant or second shooter? And if so, how difficult it is to try to maintain consistency in branding with that? For years, I didn't. I occasionally had a second shooter, but only if on request and if I was being paid extra for a second shooter. I now have my husband second shooting with me, and I trained him. So we have very similar styles because he's got exactly the same setup that I've showed him. I've taught him to shoot exactly like me. So I feel absolutely comfortable. He can just take my place, basically. I have shot with another second shooter I forgot to tell him to shoot on f2 all the way through the wedding. And so I had different f-stops, which was a little bit more difficult to edit to try to have a consistent look. But how difficult is it to try to maintain consistency in branding with that? I would say that you have to really take control of your second shooter and give very strict guidelines as to how you want them to shoot. Do I prefer zoom lenses or prime lenses? I do love a prime because of that f2. That's why I like to have one with f2, but that's 70-200. Oh, just love it. The holder for the 70-200, I have a Spider holster, but it's ancient. It's so ancient that I ran into the director of Spider holsters in an elevator at WPPI, and he was like, "How old is your holster?" Like it was so long. I think it's at least 11, 12 years old. Why so many prime lenses? Why don't I use a zoom instead? It's because the zooms go down to a minimum of f2.8, and in church especially, I really need an f2. I really need to be able to open up to f2. I also love the look of it. It's super, super sharp. Great. I think that we are done. Unless you have any more questions for me, we have managed to do this in an hour and 20 minutes. Fantastic. Akiva.